Golf can make you look invincible right before it takes everything away. From major champions whose bodies gave out, to prodigies who suddenly looked lost, these are the 8 most brutal downfalls in women's golf history. And first, we start with number 8. Number 8, Mo Martin. She was never packaged like a teenage phenom. She was never the face of women's golf. She was more of a grinder, a player who had to earn attention the hard way. And then in 2014, she got the moment every golfer dreams about. She won the Women's British Open, and she did it in unforgettable fashion, with that eagle on the final hole that felt like a movie ending. It should have been the start of something bigger. It should have launched her into a completely different tier of career. But that is exactly what makes the downfall hit so hard. Because almost immediately after that major breakthrough, her body started betraying her. ESPN reported that she was dealing with a painful thumb injury soon after that win. And later, the LPGA reported that after 2019, she was sidelined by a chronic back injury. So instead of using that major as a springboard, she ended up fighting just to stay on the course. And that's what makes Mo Martin such a perfect opener for this list. Her downfall is not the loudest, it's not the most famous, but it is one of the cruelest. She reached the summit, and instead of that changing her life forever, it almost became the last great chapter before things started slipping away. Number 7, Wie Tseng. Wie Tseng is the kind of story golf fans always come back to because it feels unfinished. Before most casual fans even knew her name, people inside the game already understood what she was supposed to become. The LPGA says she was the top-ranked female amateur from 2002 to 2003. She made 6 out of 6 cuts in LPGA majors as an amateur and even had 2 amateur top 10 finishes in majors. That is not normal. That is the profile of someone who looks destined for a huge professional career. And that's precisely why her downfall hurts more. Because in her case, the story was never really about a superstar losing her game. It was about a star who barely got the chance to begin. In a 2025 USGA interview, Wie Tseng described how a freak accident at an LPGA event in Toledo badly injured the brachial plexus in her left shoulder. She said she lost feeling in her left arm for 6 months, and that the long-term injury ultimately ended her career. Think about that for a second. This was one of the brightest young talents in women's golf having her future stolen by one accidental moment. And the next name is different, because this time, the world actually did get to see the superstar phase first. Number 6, Lydia Ko. Lydia Ko is a fascinating case because this is not a permanent collapse story. But for a while, it absolutely looked like one. Because when Lydia Ko first arrived, she didn't just look gifted, she looked unreal. She became the youngest player, male or female, to reach world number 1. And she felt like one of those rare talents who might completely rewrite the record books. She was winning absurdly young, carrying herself like a veteran, and making greatness look almost casual. Then came the slump, and it was public, very public. In 2019, she had changed virtually every part of her golfing setup, including her coach, caddy, clubs, and swing. Former coach David Ledbetter described it as sad to watch and said all those changes had contributed to her becoming just an ordinary player. That is a brutal word for someone who once felt anything but. That's why Lydia has made it to this list. Her downfall was not about disappearing forever. It was about seeing a generational prodigy search for answers in real time. And when that happens to someone who was once that dominant, the fall feels enormous even if the comeback eventually happens. In fact, that comeback almost proves how real the slump was. LPGA reported that she returned to world number 1 in 2022, which means the dip did not destroy her career, but it absolutely did create one of the most dramatic detours we've seen from a golf prodigy. Number 5, Paula Creamer. Paula Creamer's downfall is not built around one shocking day. Because for nearly a decade, She was one of the steadiest stars in women's golf, a winner, a marquee name. From 2005 through 2014, the LPGA says Creamer won 10 times, including the 2010 US Women's Open, and missed just 10 cuts in that entire stretch. That is elite-level consistency. So when a player like that stops winning, you notice. And when she stays winless after 2014, the story changes completely. Suddenly, the version of Paula Creamer that once felt so reliable starts to feel like it belonged to another era. Injuries clearly played a role. LPGA says that since that dominant stretch, she has been winless and has fought a series of injuries, including wrist issues that eventually led to surgery. That's why Paula fits right in the middle of this list. Her downfall is jarring. A major champion, a star, a player with real momentum, and then a long, quiet stretch where the wins simply stopped coming. Number 4. Lexi Thompson. Lexi Thompson might be the most emotionally complicated name on this list, because when people talk about her downfall, they're not talking about a bad player. They're talking about a player who had almost everything: talent, power, visibility, charisma, early success, and still somehow ended up with a career that feels smaller than what it once promised. Lexi was a prodigy. She qualified for the US Women's Open at age 12, won on the LPGA at 16, and by 2024 had 11 LPGA wins and more than $14 million in career earnings. On paper, that sounds huge, and it is huge. But the reason she's on this list is because that resume still feels lighter than what the early version of Lexi Thompson seemed destined to become. And a big part of that is because so much of her pain played out right in front of everyone. There was the 2017 ANA Inspiration, where Lexi was hit with a 4-stroke penalty during the final round after the LPGA received an email from a television viewer about a ball mark incident from the day before. She lost in a playoff, and the whole thing became one of the most debated rules incidents in modern women's golf. Then there was the 2021 US Women's Open, where she lost a 5-shot final round lead. Golf Digest described it as a more visceral undoing, and that's exactly the feeling people remember. By 2024, it was reported she was stepping away from full-time professional golf at just 29 years old. For someone who once looked like the future of the sport, that lands hard. Now, number 3 on this list, Wie West. Wie West is one of the biggest what-if stories golf has ever produced. And what makes her downfall so powerful is that she still had a good career. She won on the LPGA. She won the 2014 US Women's Open. She became a real star. But that almost makes the story sadder, because even real success still felt smaller than the future people once imagined for her. Michelle became famous so young that by the time she was still figuring herself out, the world had already decided what she was supposed to be. She wasn't just treated like a talented golfer. She was treated like an event, a phenomenon, the next huge thing. And when that level of hype arrives before a career is even stable, every setback gets magnified. The body problems only made it worse. Reuters reported on the start-stop nature of her comeback attempts after wrist surgery, and LPGA's own step-away coverage makes it clear that injuries remained part of the story all the way through. So even though Michelle absolutely reached major champion status, her career became defined as much by interruption as by triumph. That's why she ranks this high. Because few players in women's golf history have carried this much expectation, and few careers have left behind such a strong feeling that we never really got the full version of what they could have been. And the next name takes the idea of downfall beyond golf entirely. Number 2. Laura Baugh. Laura Baugh's story is bigger than a golf downfall. It's the story of a life going badly off track. She won the 1971 US Women's Amateur at age 16, and the LPGA notes that she turned pro the next year and was named Rookie of the Year in 1973. In other words, this was not random hype, she was the real thing. A player with star power, attention, and the kind of early success that usually points toward a huge professional career. But the superstardom never really came. And then the story got much darker. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that by 1996, Baugh was drinking so heavily that she nearly killed herself. Her alcohol abuse had damaged her platelets so badly that she started bleeding spontaneously throughout her body, even in the brain. Golf Digest later published Baugh's own words about that period, describing the 1,996 bleedout that nearly ended her life. That is why Laura Baugh sits at number 2. Because by this point, we're not talking about a player who simply lost form. We're talking about one of the brightest young golfers of her era falling so far that the story stopped being about trophies and became about survival. It is tragic, messy, painful, and deeply human. And somehow, there is still one downfall in women's golf that feels even more shocking from a pure competitive standpoint. Number 1. Yani Tseng. Yani Tseng is number 1 because no one on this list hit a higher peak and then fell this hard. At her best, Yani didn't just look like the top player in women's golf. She looked like someone who was building an all-time great career. LPGA says she became the youngest player, male or female, to win 5 major championships. She won 15 times on the LPGA and spent 109 straight weeks at world number 1. And the scary part is how young she still was when all of that happened. That's why what came next felt so shocking. After her 15th and final LPGA win in March 2012, the wheels fell off. By early 2015, she had dropped to 90th in the world. LPGA coverage from that same period described her as a former number 1 still trying to get back the form that had once made her look almost unstoppable. Yani's downfall stands out because she looked like a future all-time legend, and then lost that form while she was still so young that it barely made sense.